Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining with me as we continue our day-by-day survey or journey through the book of Proverbs. We are in chapter 4. We're picking up our conversation today in verse 13. But just one of the things I thought I would comment on briefly before we get into the text is that one of the things we find in the Old Testament in particular is the emphasis upon the daily nature of seeking God. In fact, in the temple, they had a morning sacrifice and they had an evening sacrifice. They were to do it every day of the year, 365 days. Even on feast days, when they would have large sacrificial times, they would still have not only those multiple sacrifices oftentimes, like at Passover, but they would also have a morning and an evening sacrifice. And I think in many ways, I remember Charles Spurgeon has a devotionally called Mornings and Evenings. And it's the idea that we look at the beginning of our day and we look at the end of our day, and we make sure that God is always really the bookends of our life, that we begin our day by focusing our attention, our hearts, our intentions, if you will, upon the Lord, and that when we come to the end of the day, we do the same as well. And so, it's really kind of a great discipline to begin your day in the Word, as I often encourage you to do, and to be able to end it by spending some time reflecting on God's Word as well. Now, I don't want to put a guilt trip on anybody or create a legalism, because I know some people aren't able to really get in a time of the Word, especially if you're a mom with small kids running around. It's very, very difficult to get quiet time. But nonetheless, this is oftentimes, if you have a husband who is there, he can really kind of take the kids at some point during the day and let you have that time alone with the Lord. It would be good for the kids to spend that individual time with their dads, and it would be a great opportunity for you to spend that daily time with your Father who is in heaven. So just some suggestions. I don't want to make rules and regulations out of it, but it's like a lot of things that we realize that if we don't eat our meals on a regular basis, good, sound, nutritious meals, we will become not only dehydrated, but we will become weakened. Our body will lack the nutrients it needs. And the same thing is true when we talk about our spiritual life. In fact, the metaphor that David used, he said, "I will seek you more than my daily food." So again, my practice is, as I've often said, is I start with a cup of coffee because I need the alertness. I want to be as alert as I possibly can in the morning. But at the same time, it's I would say to some people can get the same effect by just drinking a cup of hot water if you don't like the taste of coffee or tea or something else. But the whole point is that I want to begin my day not just kind of sleepily mumbling through the scriptures, but be able to make that the focal point of my day, really the point in which God can be very clear and precise in speaking into my life. And I don't have to go away with any great revelation. It's oftentimes like eating. You eat something simply not because it tastes good, but because it has nutritional value. And then through the day, your body is able to access that nutrition. The same thing is true when we become rooted and grounded in God's love through the reading of His Word. It nourishes us throughout the day and not just at that particular moment. And I think this is really one of the great challenges for all of us. How do I live my daily life mindful of the Lord? Because there's so many things, so many narratives and noises that intrude into my life that take my attention off of the necessary things. And that's what I find happen. The necessary thing is to seek the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, body, and strength. And yet we find ourselves getting caught up, involved in what are really unnecessary things, things that are okay in and of themselves, but if they're given the time and the space and the influence to compete with God's Word, they become a real problem. They can even become an idolatry. So it's the kind of idea that a man comes home from his day work and the first thing he does is jump on the internet or plays video game. And essentially he's neglecting the most important thing he has to do is to interact with his wife and his children. And probably he also tends to put the Bible at the end of his agenda of things to do on a daily basis. And that over time will begin to show an erosion in not only in the person's relationship with their families, but their relationship with God. So just some things I think that are worth talking about, worth considering, and I pray that you'll give them some thought. But let's talk about the passage that we want to look at today, verse 13 of chapter 4. It says the following, it says, "Hold on to instruction Do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life. Now, that's a pretty profound statement, when, especially the ending there, it is your life. It's, in other words, do it as if your life depended on it. But let's go through it little by little. We'll kind of break it down or unpack it a little bit. What is it that we're supposed to be holding on to? And the holding on there implies a very firm grip. It's the kind of grip that you have when you're driving your car, when you have on the handlebar, when you're driving in dangerous conditions, like up here, ice and snow or heavy torrential rains. You hold very tightly to the wheel because you don't want to lose control. And the same, or if you're, shipwrecked and you got a life jacket, you're going to hold on very tightly to that. Or even a roller coaster, you're going to hold on to the bar, most likely very tightly, because if you're like me, I don't find that a horribly enjoyable, but a very frightening kind of experience. But that's my problem. But he says, what do you need to hold on to? You need to hold on to the instructions. The Hebrew word here, musar, is interesting because it kind of rhymes with guard it well further in the passage, which is natsar. And so you can see that there's kind of a poetic harmony here that was used when they wrote these proverbs, that they made them things that had a melodic sound and a poetic or musical sound so that they would remember them more easily. And he says what you need to do is have a firm, hard grip on what? On instruction. Now, the word instruction here, or musar, once again, means discipline, chastening, correction, reproof, warning, or restraint. In other words, that's really kind of the whole gamut of what it means to go through a learning experience in your life. The first thing is it's hard to learn if you're not disciplined. In other words, I've found that if I read the Word every day, for a certain amount of time, as much as I have available to me in that day, that over time, that repeated discipline is something that will help me become more familiar with the Bible. You see, we live in this instantaneous generation where people don't like the idea of deferred gratification. But one of the things that I came to recognize is the only way to really know the Bible is to read it regularly and consistently from Genesis to Revelation. That process really is one of taking you every step deeper and more familiar with the knowledge. That's why when you study a course, usually they start with the simple basic principles that are easy to grasp, and then they become more sophisticated, more complex and dynamic, because it's really those lower depths of insight that they really want to bring you into, where suddenly the information you're learning becomes a functional part of your life. It becomes kind of intuitive, and you begin to see the world through a mathematical equation or something like that. And so it's one of those things that has to begin with this idea of discipline. It's something I do on a regular basis. It also means that when I disobey, I get chastened. Not necessarily by being punished by people, but I reap what I sow, and I get the negative consequences. And there's also correction, where we allow other people to speak into our life and say, you got that wrong. Or there's the reproof, where sometimes we have to be kind of called out because we're so out of bounds. And then there's also the warning. This is what's going to happen if you don't do this differently. And then last of all, there's restraint, where sometimes God puts us in a situation where we're locked in place and we can't do anything else. All of this is to accomplish really three simple things. He says, don't let it go. In other words, don't drop it. Don't let it slip out of your grip. Don't let the truths of God slip out of your grip because you neglect them. Secondly, he says, guard it well. Again, guard means to keep a close look on it and keep focused. Don't allow distractions to come between you and your understanding of God and His Word. And I have to admit, with my wife and I being the only one that live in our house now outside of our puppy, we can both go away and pray and focus without distraction. We don't interrupt each other's prayer times. We don't interrupt each other's Bible study time. And then we can come together and share what God is speaking to us. But that becomes the idea of just not letting distractions kind of move you away. Find a time and a place where you're most least likely to be interrupted. I even put my phone and my computer on sleep or in a mode where I can't be reached. And then finally, he says, guard it well. It literally means not guard well, but rather he says, for it is your life. In Psalm 119, the psalmist put it this way. He says, seek Him with the whole heart, Keep his peace precepts diligently. Your word I have hidden in my heart, and I will meditate on your precepts and contemplate on your ways. So this is a way in which we really guard it well. And he says, in the end, what you'll find is that it's your life, that your welfare, your safety, your happiness will depend upon doing these things. That, as the saying used to be when I was a young Christian, that sin will keep you from this book, speaking of the Bible, and the Bible will keep you from sin. And I found that that's really kind of a helpful adage in my day-to-day life, because I know that when I don't take time to spend with God, especially in the morning, but even in the evening, there's a drifting in my life, and I don't stay focused. So I encourage you to consider these principles and apply them daily. God bless you. We'll continue tomorrow.